Yeah, I tell myself I'm the dinosaur of child welfare in Georgia. Can we go to the next? Okay. I figured up till today, I've got 18,805 days in child welfare, as we say, but who's counting? Okay? And that's 51 years, 5 months, and 26 days. Okay. I've never had a real job because I started as a caseworker when I was 22 years old, and I retired as a caseworker in administration. That's how I like to kind of frame myself. I started my career in Colorado Springs, worked there for 9 years, and then came back to Georgia to start my career here. Back in 1985, I think it was. So I have been a social worker long enough to have been a caseworker or administrator for everybody in this room. That gives you an idea of how long ago I came in. It also means I remember when we used to do things very differently. Now you don't see anybody doing anything on paper and pencil. Well, when we went out in the field, we had a clipboard with paper. And that was how we did our notes and put them in files. Right now, I am with the University of Georgia. I'm the Title IV coordinator, and the most favorite thing I get to do is the mentoring part, where I get to meet with students and kind of share history and also share shortcuts into what it's like to work at DFCS and some of the things that you'll need to know as we go along in order to make your career work for you. Okay? I didn't say it at the beginning, but please, if you've got a question, please ask, because it gives me time to see if I get feedback from the audience that way. So, next. Okay, I was wondering if my career had been banished. I started off in what was termed CPS ongoing, which was the forerunner of family preservation. And the way that it was set up in the agency that I worked for was that any child who was not going into a residential placement, whether they were in a foster home or a group home or at home, and the case was going to be open, that's how we differentiated the difference between placement services and ongoing casework. So that's how I started there. I was an ongoing supervisor for 6 years, which included the nighttime system. One of the things that I always used to say when I worked here is back in the 1970s, we got paid for every hour we were on call. And I've always tried to say that at DFCS because I know you don't, okay? I know it's other duties as assigned and sleep when you can for that week. I was the lead supervisor for over 4 units. It would have been kind of what an administrator is in terms of functioning today. In there, I had 2 units of intake and 2 units of ongoing, as well as supervising one of the ongoing units. When I moved back to Georgia, I got a job called Social Service Consultant. It was the pre-runner of FPSs. And those were jobs where we spent a lot of time in the county offices doing training. We did a lot of policy interpretation, and we did a lot of case staffings. And all of the adoption staffing processes kind of ran through us at that point. We got banished in one of the reorganizations in DFCS over the years. And if you work for DFCS for a few years, you'll notice units will come and go. And then they'll come back again, 10 years down the road when somebody has the bright idea that that was probably an okay way to do it. I was a quality assurance reviewer. That was reading cases and telling people what they did or didn't do right. That was probably for me in my career one of the lower points, but it was one of the points where I maintained my employment. Sometimes you need to maintain your employment because you too can say home mortgage payment. I was a regional director in Region 2 is where I started off. Well, Region 2 at that time ran from Alabama to South Carolina and from Tennessee down to about I-85. So I had all the counties which are now in Region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 at some point in time in my career. Jason may be able to attest to this because I'm guessing he probably gets other duties as assigned where you have to do other jobs while somebody quits, somebody's sick. You go through a period of time where the budget is in trouble and you start having to cover because they're not filling positions. And so there's a lot of things that happen that you can do on the way. At one point, I kidded myself to say that I felt like I was the General Sherman in DFCS, that I'd marched from Tennessee almost out to the sea in DFCS. And it allowed a lot of relationship building. And it really didn't pass me by when I listened to Lawrence today talk about that this is Social Work Month. Social work is a profession based on building relationships. And if we practice social work in both casework and administration, it means we have to practice building relationships to be effective in that job. Now, you're going out where you are going to be a minority professional in your agency. It means you have been drilled that you have other responsibilities because of your professional education. You are the one who are going to model social work practice. Whether you're a line staff worker, a supervisor, administrator, county director, regional director, whatever position you're in, you are going to be held to account for what you can do professionally within the agency. And for a lot of you who are just going out and this is going to be your first time job, you have got so much more experience than John Q. Public coming in off the street going to work for us and maybe has been there a year or two. And they're still trying to figure out what they're supposed to do in an interview. We kind of laugh about it, but it's true. And those of us who've been in supervisory positions know it because we've seen what happens when someone who is untrained has a complex case versus someone who has a social work education and has a complex case. Outcomes are better when we hire social workers. So that's my plug for Social Work Month. And towards the end, I was social service section director for a while in the state office. And did I put, okay. And the last thing I did was called director of field operations. If you look at the organization chart now, there's a whole bunch of people, and it used to be just me. Which means I wasn't particularly effective because I was spread way too thin, and I knew it. And there are going to be times in your career when you're going to be spread way too thin, and you're going to have to prioritize your service delivery. And I would urge you to prioritize your delivery of services, whether that's administrative or whether that's casework, to where you can make the most impact for the future. Because the agency's always going to be here. But your ability to impact the agency is time limited. You know, mine was limited to the time I was there, and I knew that if I could impact other people, then I could impact, and that would essentially be my legacy plan. Okay, Guiding light, ethics and practice. You know, we don't talk a lot about ethics, but yet it should be what drives our decision making in almost everything that we do. The one for me that was hardest for me to understand at first in child welfare was the client's right to self-determination. Clients have the right to choose whether they're going to parent their child or not. From that point forward, there may be things that get required of them by the state of Georgia, and that's us. But they have the right to choose whether they're going to parent that child or not. They have the right to choose what kind of modality of treatment, if they are so desirous of that they are going to be given to or done to. You know, there's a lot of casework that's done to people rather than done with people. And we work with clients. You know, for a long time when I first came to work in DFCS, a case plan was something that a caseworker wrote in their office and took out to the client to sign. And that was a case plan. Rather than a case plan is something that you sit down and start with the assessment with your client. What do you see are the issues in your family, and move from there about what it is a case plan is going to do. We are finally getting around to getting some traction around the concept that case planning is done with clients, not to clients, and that service delivery is based on case plans. Monthly contacts, and see, I just said it myself, monthly contact. Well, why the hell do we have monthly contacts? It's to evaluate the case plan. Why don't we call them case plan review contacts? You know, we label things, and it's a misnomer a lot of times on what the purpose is. And I see Betty shaking her head, and I know Betty's done a lot of training with new casework staff coming in. And those of us who've been here for a while forget what it's like not to know what the hell we're doing on somebody's front porch. I see some new people shaking their head. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know what I'm doing on somebody's front porch. Hopefully not falling through, which has occurred in our agency. And workers have been injured before falling through front porch boards. Honesty is the basis of all relationships. Whether it's a supervisory relationship, whether it's a casework relationship, whether it's an administrative relationship, whether you're the division director, your relationship with your staff and the community partners and the other community collaborative partners, our basis has to be around honesty. If we can't do something, we need to tell them. We can't do that right now because blank, blank, blank. Is that something you could advocate for us about? Because it looks self-serving when we advocate for it. A lot of our job around advocacy is around the issue of getting other people involved with what our business is. There was a time in my career when I used to say that you can look at counties that have a quote-unquote moat mentality. In other words, there's the castle, and then there's the moat that all the sewage is dumped into, and we're going to keep everybody out of the DFCS castle because we don't want to share the work with them. Finally, we've come around to understand that that's not productive. If the community doesn't own the issue of child welfare and child well-being, we've lost the case. And that's partly because we didn't make the case to the community. So again, advocacy is a clear role. Learn how to tell the hard truth. Whether you're a supervisor, whether you're a caseworker, whether you're whatever position, telling people the hard truth above and below you in the hierarchy is critical. If you're a supervisor, a hard truth conversation may be that this worker is not fit for this job, but maybe there's something else in the agency they can do. It's not about firing people or getting rid of people. It's about us not having placed them where they could be the most effective. Telling a hard truth to a parent is you have not followed your case plan. You've been to court 4 times. The judge has said that he's going to terminate your rights if you refuse to follow the case plan and you choose to continue your behavior. My quote-unquote monthly contact with that client needs to be reinforcing that message every month. I have to tell the judge what it is that you're doing on your case plan. If you continue to refuse, I have to tell him that you are not making any progress. And he will make a decision around the issue of whether your children get to live with you or not. He will make the decision about whether your children were ever born into your family or not. So hard truths are something that in social work, it usually lands in our lap, that we're the ones who have to deliver those messages. Now, we don't have to be hard asses about it. There's a way to be compassionate. There was an old concept called supportive confrontation, where you would confront the client about their behavior in a supportive manner. You don't just confront somebody that they're not doing X, Y, or Z. You have got to give them an avenue for how they can change their behavior. And that's usually one of the areas that we as a profession kind of fall flat in the agency, is we're not as effective in telling our clients what it is that is expected of them in terms of community norms. And that's almost always around what judges are going to interpret their behavior as being. Learn how to hear the hard truths about your practice. You know, I knew more about social work when I got out of graduate school than I thought I would ever know the rest of my life. And all I did was having to keep learning. We're in a profession that continues to grow and continues to move forward in terms of therapeutic interventions, etc. So hearing hard truths about your practice, you know, you come across this way, that way, and the other. When you get that kind of feedback, you need to think about it. After you get over your initial reaction, because most all of us are defensive, you know, don't want to hear the things that I'm not doing right in your opinion, but we need to take into account other people's perceptions of ourselves. This is maybe the biggest one because Dr. Washington from UGA and I have talked about this because it came up in our class after we talked about it last year. You do not work in a social work profession at DFCS. You are an executive branch of government employee. That means the governor is your CEO. That means when he says something, that's what the agency's going to do. In my career, I saw governors make adoptive placements. I saw governors make CPS decisions. I saw governors make mistakes. The one that I remember was, Evelyn, I'm not sure it was down in your area or whether it was down in 8, placed a child at a legislator's requirement that we place the child there. Placed the child there. 6 years later, the county is out doing a CPS investigation because that child is living in a chicken coop. It doesn't sound very good to be able to say, Representative so-and-so was the one who told us to do it. Well, it's not his job. It's our job. You're going to get political pressure within your job. And being able to withstand that is something that as you move up through the ranks, you're going to have to develop a little bit thicker skin for that. Next, please. Understand that you have a professional relationship with a client, not a personal one. that may be one of the biggest issues that you have a jump on the average staff coming into the agency, because relationships that they have had have most always been personal ones. So I'm supposed to go out and see people and interview them. Their only experience is on a personal level. We are professionally trained, and we're trained in a way that we should be able to conduct ourselves professionally so that the client knows where we're coming from. That's not to say that you won't have countertransference issues, but countertransference issues are a normative part of a relationship, and it's part of what you need to cover in supervision. I think we've kind of covered advocacy earlier. Okay, decision-making continuum. You will be called on to make decisions every day that you work in DFCS, irregardless of your position. And the decisions that you're making usually have lifetime impacts on our clients and on our families. I used to use this for myself, and I used it more administratively. Was my decision making in a certain context coming from a professional capacity, or was it personal capacity? And where I had to watch myself, especially as I moved up the food chain in administration, was somebody really pissing me off? And I was coming from a personal point rather than a professional point? Was somebody generating anger in me that made me naturally react out of a personal perspective rather than a professional perspective? And I would challenge you to think about that. If you're a caseworker and don't supervise anybody, your professional versus personal is most caseworkers who are going out in the field are evaluating our families based on how they were raised. So how they were raised may not be how their client's family functions. So you have a natural level of conflict there, and when the caseworker is sitting on the stand testifying, that bias that they have, again, countertransference issues, that they have about how clients ought to behave comes through. You can hear it, to me, you can hear it best on courtroom testimony. That, for supervisors, ought to be a clue that at least once a year you ought to go to court with your worker and listen to them testify and give them feedback about that, because that's one of the most traumatic induced points in casework practice is being on the stand, being cross-examined, and even worse, being questioned by the judge about why you made certain decisions or why you made certain terms. As you get into administration, I used to use that old cost-benefit analysis to look at it. How much is this going to cost versus how much good is the agency going to have? And one of the things that I remember is, it was in the late 90s. We had an evidence-based program in Georgia that was being utilized for low impact kind of CPS cases, but it was the most expensive intervention available to the agency. And when I went to the state office, my thoughts to it were, I can't afford this. The clients who were the most in need were not getting served because we were spending all our money on low-risk cases because it met the parameters of this intervention at the time. So I use that as an example of, because a family is chaotic and chronic and multidimensional in terms of problems, doesn't mean that you cut them off and you decide we're not going to serve them because they're not going to get any better. My bias right there. They're not going to get any better. Okay? So, spread the pain. One of the things, this comes from my administrative part of my career was you can't have an agency that functions with this silo having lots of money and this silo having very little money and this silo over here having no money. It's not effective. It creates hard feelings, and it creates hard feelings in an office across the board where I can't do my job because I don't have resources, yet you're talking about not being able to spend all the money in your program area. And we tend to run like that because our programs come down in a siloed fashion. The federal legislation and the state legislation is usually in silos. And when it comes that way, it's not particularly effective because it doesn't allow an administrator some prerogatives around moving money around. You're right now in DFCS at a point in time in your career where you're having to relearn different assessment skills to be able to serve clients because the way that you did things a year ago is not the way you can do things now. Promote and hire people that are smarter than yourself. That's one that I really tried to work on for myself because I finally hit the realization in my career that I didn't know everything, and there were some things that other people did better than me. And I needed to get behind them even though I was higher on the chain of command than they were. It pays to hire the smartest people you can get. Because the ideas, again, Lawrence's point this morning, the good ideas that happen usually happen at the lower levels, where the rubber meets the road. Quick think. Everybody who sits behind a DFCS desk has walked into their list of 5 things they're going to do today, and the phone is ringing with 10 emergencies that are going to take your whole day. And none of that stuff is going to get done. And to me, quick think is your ability to assess what's a higher priority than not. So reacting to critical situations is critical. Thank you, Angela. Okay, one of DFCS's words of wisdom: if you want a pay raise and a promotion, be prepared to move. I know you laugh, but I'm really not kidding. Jason, will you say that again?
I said it's true.
It's true. And you need to be willing to do that because that's an organizational truism, if you will, that if you look at people who have been successful and start to move up the chain in terms of salary, you'll look at their resumes and you'll see that they've moved around. You cannot stay in the same job and expect that your salary will go up and up and up. It's not going to happen, at least not at DFCS. And my guess is probably not in the rest of the state government. Personnel change is a constant. That was difficult for me when I first got out of school because I was used to going to school with cohorts of students that were always there for that year and would always be there. And I got to work and somebody's leaving every month. You know, how does this work? How do you create a relationship? How do you create some institutional knowledge with everybody coming and going? You're going to have to get used to it. Going to have to get used to it. I haven't seen a time when that wasn't true in DFCS. Politics, again, you work in state government, the executive and legislative intervention in cases, policy, law, and administrative appointments. I don't need to say anything more, I think, about that. Those of you who have been in the agency for a while know exactly what I'm talking about. Those of you who are coming into the agency will experience it at some point in your career. Okay. Here's a hard one for people like myself who like to talk. Know when to speak and know when to listen. And what are the consequences of not doing either? at any given time. My example is being in a statewide meeting with a division director we had long ago, with a governor who was calling for like a 5% budget reduction and plans. And he was wiping out the entire regional office system and said it was because that the governor wanted it. And David, being stupid, raised his hand and asked, how much budget reduction does your plan drive versus what the governor asked for? And I didn't realize how much I was embarrassing him, because the governor wanted 3 or 4% and his plan was at least 10. And he was talking to the group of people who were going to get banished. David found himself, that was a Friday, on Monday morning, David is reporting to DeKalb County DFCS to do CPS intake for 3 months. And my boss happened to be on an extended trip overseas, so I had no coverage. So I did CPS intake for 3 months because I needed to say home mortgage payment. Never burn your bridges when you leave. You may work with the same people over and over and over again, and one time you're the boss, and next time they're the boss, and the next time you're the boss, and the next time they're the boss, and it goes back and forth. And there are people in here who can swear to that because it's occurred in their career. And it's just the way that it happens. So no matter how it feels good to say F you as you're leaving the job, it is not a way to build your career. Get good supervision. And right now, and in my tenure at DFCS, we have always required supervisors to almost first and foremost put administrative duties. We have not talked about the educative and training portion of their job the way we talk about administrative functioning. So learn how to get good supervision and use it. And that means that you may have to ask. You know, I think I'm developing some countertransference issues in this case, blank, blank, blank. And your supervisor's eyes may get big around because nobody else has asked that. You as a professionally trained social worker need to be able to ask for good supervision. And good supervision doesn't always come from your supervisor. It could come from a colleague. It could come from a regional office person. It could come from a work group. I know all of you have got study groups that you've been a part of now in your education. And those people will become a sounding board for you as you move through your career. So learn what good supervision is and seek it out. Make time for staff development. How many supervisors have we got in the office? Wow. In the conference, just 1, 2? Okay. For those of you who've been supervisors, I know you've heard, I don't have time to go to training because I have to do my work. Well, how many times are you going to get better at your work after you go to some kind of training? Almost always. Unless it's simply an administrative training where you're learning about a new form. Yeah. We need to make supervision about practice and about getting better at practice. This is something that I used to do when I moved up the food chain as part of my kind of introductory part of my conferences with people. I would ask them how they and their family are doing. Because as you work with people who are aging up through middle age and advanced, there are going to be people who have children who are sick, parents who are sick, spouses who are sick. They're going to have all kinds of life events that occur. And if you haven't had that happen, it just hasn't been your turn yet. Because it will come about at some point where you need to take time and flex time to do caretaking for a parent, to do caretaking for a child, to go back to school as an event. I always use this as kind of my icebreaker. One of the things that I've learned in doing mentoring with students is one of the best icebreakers for people who don't have kids is almost everybody has a pet. And talking about their pet for 5 minutes really sets them at ease, sets me at ease. I even have pictures of my pets in this presentation. Okay, anybody heard of Mike Thurman? Okay, come on, he's running for governor, guys. And he was the DFCS director. And he may have been one of our best directors that we ever had. He was the only director I ever had that wrote an op-ed in the AJC about why caseworkers can't foretell actions by parents in the future. He was the first and the only one who said we don't have fortune-telling crystal balls to be able to see what people are going to do in the future. He was a really good leader, but he also was a good leader in a way. He told us as an agency that we can work with anybody for a reasonable amount of time, no matter what they're like, whether that's a collaborative partner or whether that's a client. And gosh, I guess Mike was our director back in the 90s, someplace in the 90s. That still rings home for me. Respect coworkers' boundaries and their transference issues. You're going to find that some of your coworkers have been victims of abuse, are currently victims of abuse, are going through divorces, are going through trauma issues with their children, whatever it may be. Your worker may or may not want to talk about that. And if they do, then let that be something they initiate, not something that you ask. Well, did your crazy husband hit you last night? I mean, you know, that's not a way to engender working relationships. Learn your own boundaries and your own countertransference issues. It affects your assessment of clients. Again, what we need to drive home with all of our staff is our internal biases reflect in their assessment of the client's functioning. And what that means for the client is usually they're going to get the bad end of the stick, whether that's your impact with court testimony or just decisions that you make at the office about their case. So you've got to make sure you understand what you think are your boundaries and countertransference issues, and remind yourself every day at work, the way I was raised is not the way everybody else has to be. You're on a team, act like it. I hear people talk about, well, I work better by myself. Well, good. Go start a company. This is a state agency that is built on a team doing things. Teamwork as the basis of a way to get things done. If you think about it, all those pain in the butt group projects that you've done in the universities, there's a purpose in that being in your university course of study. It's because your employer of the future wants you to have that skill. And then your employer wants you to utilize that skill. So when you have people who want to do things by themselves, you really need to do some of that cognitive behavioral therapy and challenge that illogical thought concept that they can do everything by themselves. Watch out for people with no outside life. When I became a regional director, my first boss was a lady who had no outside life whatsoever. And she worked from about 6:30 in the morning to about 11:30 at night and expected you to be available too. I remember she called me one time when I was asleep. And I'm thinking, you're really not going to get my best thinking at 11:30 at night. You know, I really need to establish a boundary with you about that. You can't, and my other bias is you cannot do this work because it is so emotionally taxing without having some supportive outside people, support systems, whatever, because you just can't do this work without having some place to go recharge. If you want to move up or over, make yourself available to lose those skills and knowledge bases. And the next part is volunteer to help. Don't wait to be assigned. If you want to become a supervisor, let your supervisor and administrator know you're interested in that as a career path, and what can they give you as work to help you learn those skills. Because that sets you up in a job interview when you're going in there, and you can say, no, I haven't held the position, but I've had these responsibilities. And that takes you to the front of the class. Okay, this is one right here that probably we should put agency-wide. During the hard times, make yourself shine, not be the pain in the ass to tell everybody why it can't be done. Making yourself shine is a way to put yourself out front for your leadership to take notice of you in the hard times. And that's to develop those kinds of skills of, hey, this is really, I really don't like this, it's really not good, but I think I can help with X, Y, or Z. That's leadership. That will be noticed, and that will be held on the books for when you want to do something else down the road. I did this, and I urge staff to do this. Take a mental health day every now and then, and take an annual vacation. This is a marathon and not a sprint. As I believe Jason said this morning, I believe that. I saw people in my career who I'm not taking any leave because I can retire 2 months early, 1 month early. Well, you're a friggin' basket case by the time you get to that place because you have not taken care of yourself. So take care of yourself. Plan your mental health days around days when you don't have anything pending. You know, you don't take a mental health day when you have a court hearing. You don't have take a mental health day when the whole region's PMF system needs to be delivered. You know, use it smart. Plan your career moves. I remember at my retirement, my first regional director spoke at it, and she said, you know, I didn't know what to think of David at first because he came in and told me he wanted my job. Well, I thought maybe I didn't deliver that very well. I would like to be in a job like yours in my career. What do I need to do? What are the responsibilities I need to learn? What are the knowledge bases that I need to learn? Have a 5, 10, 15-year strategy. If you're going in a casework position now, look around the agency. Start to look at what you think you'd like to do. Do a variety of things, because when you get down the road and you're interviewing for upper level administrative kinds of positions, being able to say that I've done this job, this job, this job, this job, tells the people that are hiring you that you have a wide breadth of experience and that you can learn new things. And that's a critical thing that you want to get across in any job interview. I'm capable of learning. Make time for team functions and team supports. Again, that goes back to you're on a team, act like it. If you're the leader of the team, be like it. And sometimes forced fun is kind of a requirement of the job. Never stop learning. I thought when I got out of graduate school, if I ever had to read another textbook, I would shoot myself. And after I'd been there 5 or 6 months, it's like, oh, I need to go back. I need to review this chapter or that chapter, and I need to review it for the purposes of learning how to practice it, not learning how to regurgitate the learning. So never quit learning. Be open to change. That's one thing, like I kiddingly said at the beginning, my first dictation machine was a pad with a pencil and made notes that way. Well, now it's on computer, it's going to be on dictaphone, and at some point down the road, AI is going to be writing our documentation for us. So, remember that the way you did things as a newbie is not the way things are happening now. And boy, there's a couple of us in the room who can relate to that. Hi, Evelyn. As you age, remember your physical fitness. That was something that I did not do well, and I wish I had. And I really didn't do well at that until after I retired. And given my family's medical history, I'm surprised I made it to retirement without being in a coronary care unit. My relaxation, if you can see, that's my dog. Oh, that's one of my dogs. I've had Irish setters since I was 14. That's one. We can go to the next. That's another one. And that's my need for speed. And my farthest ride was with my brother after I retired, and we spent 30 days on the bike and made it as far west as Glacier National Park. So we had some experiences. Okay, screw-ups, because you're going to have them in your career, and it's a matter of how you deal with them. Preventative, think before you engage your mouth. And I had trouble learning that. But over time, I did learn it and moderate it some. Take a deep breath. Not everybody needs to hear your emotional outburst. It's not necessarily productive for me to be hearing your need to ventilate. Take ownership of your errors and corrective actions. Be proactive with your supervisor. If you screw up, get on the phone to your supervisor and tell them, I think I've screwed up, and I think this is what I need to do to make it right. You can buy a lot of grace for things that you mess up if you take ownership, and you take ownership of immediately developing a plan to correct it. I need to go back and apologize to so-and-so for how I delivered this message. I need to apologize for having a tantrum on the witness stand. That kind of thing. Know when an apology should be tendered. That's something that some people fall short of. Even though you take responsibility for an error, there is a time and place that an apology should be tendered. It may be in private, there's nothing wrong with that, but it should be tendered. Okay, futuring. This is something that I used to talk to the regional directors and my county directors about, and I think you can do it with your own staff. And that's the fact that if you'll take 20 minutes a month, and who doesn't have 20 minutes a month, to think about where it is your job and the job you may want is going, and how that's going to look. What changes in practice do I need to make personally to get to that point? And what impact on agency practice do I need to have as a part of making that change? What improvements can I bring to the administration of programs? For me, building a better social worker of the future is something I've been working on for a long time now, and it's something that is kind of my ending plan for my legacy in child welfare, and that's I want to turn over child welfare to a better educated and practice-performing social worker in child welfare, so that the mistakes of the past don't become the mistakes of the future. Building a better supervisor in the future. As administrators, one of the things I would ask you to think about in futuring is what is it going to take to build a better supervisor, and how can I make that their job? If you think about it, we really drill hard on administrative functions to supervisors. We don't drill nearly as hard around practice with our supervisors as we do with administration. I understand all the reasons for that, but I also understand that I had to change my perspective in order to do that for the future. What the future handles, right now I know that you cannot use AI in the agency, period. I know that's a flat ultimatum. You're liable to have a division director, one or two division directors down, who's going to bring a new system in using AI in the agency. AI is coming, whether we like it or not. For me, what I'm talking about and my futuring right now is I'm thinking about how could we develop a system of AI for supervisors to read case records in terms of policy review and give feedback on that policy, and then give a practice review on what the practice looks like there. And so that the caseworker and the supervisor would have some kind of printout or screen or whatever to look at that would start to develop case reviews as a learning tool. And so that's what my futuring is right now, is I'm trying to think that through and how that might get initiated. For anybody who wants to be the division director, my bias is you start with your supervisory core and make them your culture bearers in AI. That was kind of my first provision. Funding swings. You guys are experiencing one of the more radical ones right now. I think the last time the agency went through this kind of gyration was 08, 09, and 10, when we lost over 25% of our staff, I think, at that time, because we went from, when I became the social service section director, there were like 8,400 service positions in the state. And when I left, there were like 6,200. So my career at that level was spent trying to figure out how you make child welfare run with fewer people. And you can't do it the same way you used to do it. Political and legal swings, you can see that happening right now over the last several years, and you will continue to see that because political swings will drive legislation out of either Congress or the state houses on how things will get done and what money they will put towards certain programs, and what money they will, what programs they'll wipe out because there's no funding. Good example for the educators, I think, right now is every school district is now going to have a weapons detection system. And you know how much money they attach to that bill? Zero. So if you're on a local school board, how do you figure out how to put gun detection devices in every school at every public opening in the school system? That to me is one of the better examples of unfunded mandates that we've had, and that just happened. Social and cultural shifts and its effect on practice. I think right now we're seeing a real move to where some parents are wanting to have their children have more freedom to go. And in many ways, I think this is kind of the way I was raised, that we had bicycles, so the south side of Jacksonville was ours to go wreak havoc in. I'm thinking about today, a fourth grader would not be allowed to have a boat and go out in the St. Johns River. Well, in fourth grade, I had a boat with a motor, and I went out in the St. Johns River. And here are these huge ships going by, and here's two kids in fourth grade motoring along out in the river. The culture is swinging back to where parents want their kids to have more independent socialization. In some ways, I think it's kind of a whiplash kind of effect of being more strict in our parenting than what some other cultures might look at. Biological impacts in child welfare. At some point, why isn't 23andMe becoming part of our relative search? You know, and it will. It will. At some point, some judge is going to decide that his wife got a 23andMe and they found all kind of relatives in their closet. And bing, there goes the light bulb. Why couldn't I do this for Johnny and Susie on X case? And there's the caseworker on the stand. Well, what happened when you tried to do 23andMe? And we don't have an answer for it. It's really short-term futuring right now, because I think that's coming. Genetic preconditions to be assessed through swabs. I don't think it's more than 20 years outbound towards caseworkers maybe taking a mouth swab to be able to do preconditions medically, where we can start to look at what are genetic precursors of certain conditions, and looking at doing that. Biological markers for future behaviors monitored by microdrone. I must have watched some kind of science fiction thing when I came up with this. You know, why not have, you know, they make micro drones that are smaller than your little fingernail. Why couldn't that be a way to monitor parenting behavior in a house? Why couldn't they make them now that actually smell humans? Why couldn't that be a way to have, for a diabetic child that's out of control, have that as his kind of guide dog as a way? Protective orders monitored by a drone. Why not? Right now we do ankle bracelets on people on probation. What's a drone following somebody around in their house? I mean, we're not that far away.
Put the joint down.
Roll another one. Worker fitness for duty. That's one that we haven't really talked about at all. But I think that's coming down the road, that we may have to have an annual physical for fitness for duty. And we all who've been here for a long time know that we have had experience with people with medical conditions that were disruptive at work and that were extremely ineffective and detrimental to clients at work. And we really had no way of knowing that. So, retirement, this day counts too. When you're having a bad day, this day counts too towards retirement. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We heard that this morning, and boy, that's true. 100-yard dash people can't run more than a mile without dying. You're going to run a lot of miles at DFCS, so you need to be a marathoner. Make a financial plan and work the plan from the start. Given the retirement plan the way it is right now, you cannot make your plans around having a pension that will, adequately support you. You will have to have other incomes. Plan for realities. College education costs for you, your children, caring for other family members, health care costs. Since I went on Medicare and have Medicare Advantage through the state, I can't believe how good our medical insurance is compared to the other people that I talk to. Our medical insurance is great, and I didn't used to think that. Also, when you retire, you still have a home that needs a roof, that needs a new hot water heater, that needs X, Y, and Z, and you're going to have to take care of that. The bottom one is, I want to go out on top of my game. The bottom one is that you need to have the mindset that you may want to work after you retire, but you don't want to have to work after you retire. And everybody who's saying that is kind of like, I went and had a second career in academia, but that was my choice. It was not because my budget had a hole in it. Okay, and the last one is go out on top of your game. Know when to go and keep a check on feedback when you're getting to the point that you need to go. Build a legacy plan and develop those in your organization to take your place. A lot of people in the organization, when they move up the food chain, really neglect that, and that really shows up in the future leaders because they have not been adequately trained and prepared for the future and what their job responsibilities will be. Get professional help in doing your retiring. The state offers some good resources, and then get a financial planner. You'd be surprised at what you can do with your money as you retire. I think that's it.